Hello and welcome to Kate's Kitchen Party. Today I'm set my table up at Aaron's Mill in the Stingers Mall, which is formerly Zeller's, but we're very fortunate to be in this space where they do some incredible stuff for kids locally, lending instruments and raising money for DIFA. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We are here to talk about you and the things that make you tick and the things that make you get out of bed in the morning and the things that really matter to you. So I would love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and kind of tell me what we're going to talk about today.
No worries. So my name's Kristi Bakker, and I'm a mom of 4 children.
Okay.
My oldest is 27 years old.
Okay.
And he has an ultra rare disability called XLID 98.
What is it? Sorry?
XLID 98.
XLID 98. Okay.
And then my second is 18, and he's just gone off to college. My third is 16, and she's in grade 12. And my fourth is my niece that we took in 3.5 years ago, and she hasn't left. And she's 14.
I have some level of understanding of how hard it can be to navigate the systems that we have in place, when you need extra supports, extra resources, funding, therapies, testing, like all of this kind of stuff is, even for the most informed people, incredibly challenging at times, most of the time. When we got our son's autism diagnosis, his diagnosis came on paper 2 weeks after the Ontario Autism Program stopped their funding program. So we've literally had 0 support from the province. He's still on a waiting list. But when we moved to Brockville, we were very lucky to have Connect Well, Kids Inclusive, Dr. Berghardt down at the Brockville General Hospital. The school, Aj Gabriel, has been really good. And it's been like the local supports. But navigating the rest of it has been impossible. So I can fully appreciate that you've had probably, much, much greater challenges because different thing, right? Different diagnosis, different time. He's much older than my son.
100%. 100%. I feel like I've been fighting the system since the day I met him.
Oh.
Whether it's fighting with the school system, fighting with the government system, fight any kind of system, I feel like I've been groundbreaking. And I've been told that I was going to break ground.
Yeah.
When it came to him and things.
Yeah, because it's rare.
Yes.
So what, like, how does it,
what are his symptoms?
Yeah, what are his symptoms? Like, what is...
So when he was young, he would hit himself. He would pinch, pull hair. He would bite, scratch. He's nonverbal. He's in diapers. He wasn't walking.
Okay.
And when he fed himself, he would literally take a burger and put the whole thing in his mouth, and he'd start to aspirate.
Oh, my gosh.
And I remember I was told when he was in kindergarten that he was never going to walk.
Yeah.
And I looked at the people at that time around the table, and I just said, you don't know me.
Well, they don't know him either.
Right.
And I know I'm speaking from the autism mom perspective, but you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and it's the same across the board. We're not all the same. We are all different. We all experience things differently, and regardless of what the diagnosis is, every individual deals with those things differently or exhibits them differently. And so that kind of rhetoric really always bothers me, like, oh, they're never going to do this. Oh, can you not tell me what my kid can and can't do? Because
let's
I feel
talk about
like
what they can do.
Let's talk about
about
how we're going to accommodate them. Let's talk about how we're going to teach them. And sure, there are things that my kids, but that's true of any child. There are things that
100%
any child is never going to do, right? And that's life,
right?
It's individuality, right? So I don't like that. I have a really hard time with that rhetoric.
It's like looking at somebody with a disability or looking at them with a different ability,
right? And so a few years back, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and it's one that causes a lot of a lot of pain. Like I'm in a lot of pain a lot of the time. And I'm, I have a rheumatologist and I'm treated for it. But this notion of having a disability really offended me at first, right? Because I have an invisible, on paper, it's a disability. And because I feel very able. Mm-hmm. And so when, to have somebody call me disabled really offended me.
Yep.
And I said, I'm not disabled, but I have a disability. And there is a difference in that language. And I know not everybody's as sensitive about it, but when you get that diagnosis so late in life, it's hard to wrap your head around. It's hard to explain it to people.
I totally understand that because 6 years ago, I ended up with a brain injury at work.
Right.
And so now I'm dealing with a brain injury for life.
Right.
So somebody who went from not having a brain injury to having a brain injury,
yeah.
I find that it's made me a better person just in terms of even with the kids at school. When they're like, I need my noise canceling headphones, I'm like, where are they? Let's go get them.
Let's go get them.
Right?
Yep.
It's not a conversation. You need them. You need them.
Yeah.
Who am I to question why at the moment?
Well, and that's exactly it. And the fact that these kids are now able to recognize what their needs are and vocalize them is something that needs to be, acknowledged and supported because they're trying to cope. They're trying to do the things that, that they're going to need to do as they get older. I don't. And again, we're talking about your son who is in his 20s, right? So in the early 2000s, very different kind of rhetoric about mental health or disabilities, invisible disabilities, and people just don't. I feel like unless you experience it firsthand, either yourself or through a family member or somebody you love, you just can't kind of wrap your head around it.
For sure.
But I'm a child of the 80s, and I didn't know until I was like in my 40s that, I had this issue. So it connected a lot of dots for me later in life, but my parents didn't know. My parents didn't know what was going on with me back then, and so it's hard. It's hard to advocate when there's a lot of mystery surrounding disability, a lot of disbelief too.
100%. You look well.
Thank you.
Right?
I feel good. That's the thing.
Some days you don't.
Some days you don't, though. And it gets minute by minute, too, right? So I can be feeling fine. And then I'll walk into a grocery store for half an hour, and then all of a sudden I'm so tired, I can barely function.
Or a light catches you the wrong way.
Or something, right?
Or
all of a sudden my knee is throbbing. And, and it's dynamic. It changes from one moment to the next. And I don't always know when I'm going to feel sick, or I don't know when I'm going to feel tired. And so I have to kind of plan my day that way. But the days that I feel good, oh my gosh, am I ever on fire? Because I appreciate those days.
Yes.
I love them. I love those days. But there's also a whole psychology behind the notion of, disability. And when you're advocating for people with disabilities, or you yourself have a disability, it's so important to be able to just vocalize it and explain it to people. And I find it easier to advocate for my son than I do for myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And advocating is what I've had to do for his entire life.
Absolutely.
I've had to advocate every step of the way, and I still advocate. And I remember when I adopted him, one of the things I said was that he was going to change Brockville.
Yeah.
We actually had somebody in a store once say to us, "You bring him out in public?"
I've heard stuff like that before too.
And that was with my best friend, was with my son at the time. And I'll never forget, it makes me laugh to this day, because she looked at the gentleman, and it was his wife that had made the comment. And she looked at the gentleman and said, "You bring her out in public?" And I thought, that is classic. What a comeback to that. Yeah, he is out in public. And yes, he's going to make noise. And yes, he's different from your children sitting over there. And I know that.
Yeah. And he does too. I'm sure on some level. He knows, right? He knows. And to have, instead of having people comment about him, when he's there,
Yeah.
maybe just say hi,
Exactly.
right? And I think that these kinds of conversations and pulling in people to say, you know, maybe just say hi next time.
And it's okay.
And it's okay.
It's okay to ask questions.
Yeah.
I would prefer somebody walk up and ask why he's doing something as opposed to stare at him
And gawk.
and gawk.
Yeah, because he's a human being.
Yep. And the more people that we educate,
Yeah.
the better our world is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.